This episode of the Shamrock Show is brought to you by the law firm of Scott Camassar and Stephen Reck. Check them out online at stephenreck.net. That's STEPHENRECK.net. And check them out on Facebook. Scott is my guy. And in this episode, you're going to see why, man. This episode, as always, is sponsored by them, but Scott is my guest. Can't wait for you to check him out and see why he's the lawyer you should trust. If you've hurt your neck and need a check, see Scott Camassar and Stephen Reck. Tell him Sean sent you. Law firm of Scott Camassar and Stephen Reck.
Hey, what's up, buddy?
What's going on, man?
I'm hanging out. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Perfect, man. Crystal
Can you
clear.
can you hear my dogs fighting in the background?
Yeah, I didn't until you pointed it out, but yeah. I've had my dog jump in my lap doing these. I've had my cat just walk across. It's a hazard of home studio.
Yeah.
How you doing, man?
I'll stop eventually. Good, man. Good to see you.
You got yourself a
bottle?
hey, there we go. There we go. I know as I remember, you're usually more of a Scotch guy, yeah?
Yeah. But I do like this proper number 12, actually. It's really good.
At its, I mean, not to sound like a salesman, but at its price point, man. I mean, it's a great entry level whiskey. I think they did a great job with it.
I think it's great. So
You know, so cheers to you, sir.
cheers, bro. Good to see you.
No, it's great to see you, man. And I know you're busy. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this, man.
Well, it's 6 o'clock. I'd otherwise be, drinking and, doing nothing. So
Yeah, so drink and do a little something. It's perfect. So I gotta ask you, as an attorney, is the most annoying thing in the world people like me hitting you up for free legal advice? Like, do you have friends and family all the time like, hey, what do you think about this? Because
they do,
feel
but I
like-
don't think it's annoying. I actually, I actually appreciate when people actually, think to ask me, like that they actually care what I might have to say about it. Usually it's stuff I don't even know about, but I don't mind.
well, with your profession being an attorney, your product, right, is your brain, it's your mind, it's your knowledge. So like me as a career and a bar guy, yes, you got people asking you for free stuff all the time, but it's not as flagrant as I would imagine, like people just like asking you like, oh hey, can you do your job for free for a minute for me? But and I'm guilty of it, which is why I ask, because I know I'm like, anytime I've asked you anything, I'm like, oh man, I hate to be this guy, but
It's all right. It's all right. I mean, it's particularly if it's friends, I mean, if it's, it's not like you're just some random stranger calling me up out of the blue. And I talk to those people too, if they call.
yeah.
But, you know,
All right. Well, I know me. I feel like the last thing I want to do when I'm not at work is talk about work. So like even if it's something that you have a passion for, I think that you'd want to clock out. So I was just wondering if maybe you want to do a little PSA to tell people to leave you alone or not.
no, that's all right. That's all right. I'm here to answer your questions, whatever it might be.
All right. Free legal advice. Slide into Scott's direct messages. Um, so I was a terrible student in high school, right? I just I paid no attention. I had very short sight, and then when I graduated high school and I realized I kind of had like no idea what I was going to do with myself. But I went to Three Rivers for criminal justice because I thought being a lawyer would be something that I would be interested in and be good at. And after going to college for a couple semesters, I realized I didn't have 8 more years of this or whatever in me. But how did you end up down this path that you've become an attorney? What brought you there? Because to me, like when I started doing this podcast, I think that just people who I know, like regular people, are the most interesting and have the most interesting stories, and I think they're the most relatable and the most that like people get a lot out of it. And I've kind of spun off into different avenues and like kind of tried to see, well, if I read a book, will this author talk to me, or who's willing to talk to me, and that's fun. But my real passion for doing this was like the story of the regular like guy, like the day-to-day person, because I think that that's where there's a lot of gold. So how did you find yourself being in this field?
Well, my dad's a lawyer, so
Okay.
I grew up exposed to lawyers and lawyer things. He tried to talk me out of it, of course, and I didn't listen. I'm the only kid of his who didn't listen. I went to law school, but when I was in college, I actually when I decided I was probably going to go to law school, I actually was thinking more along the lines of criminal law. For a while, I thought I might want to be a prosecutor, but I hated criminal law in law school. It's just I just hated the class, mainly because it was hard, and I just didn't think it just didn't interest me the way I thought it. So
Really?
yeah, so actually my favorite class in law school was torts, which is civil litigation, like what I'm actually doing. So,
Right.
but I my first job out of law school was working for a personal injury firm. So, you do that for a couple of years and suddenly it's the only thing you know how to do. So you just keep doing it.
It's got to be, I would imagine, a more lucrative path as well. I feel like to criminal law, you at least starting off, you're probably going to end up maybe public defender or with a lot of clients that don't have money, right? So if you're doing this as a profession, it might be just a better route too. Maybe no.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there's plenty of criminal lawyers that make a lot of money. I mean, it kind of depends on, sort of where you are and how good you are, the following you get. But, but yeah, I mean, we do, we do okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wasn't trying to pry into your personal finances.
No,
I just kind of, I never really thought about it until you were talking, and I started thinking really like if I was going down that path, and I kind of, I'm looking at the end game, right? Like, what's my chances of getting to defend high profile criminals who have a lot of money, or what are my chances of possibly getting to represent someone who's going to get a big settlement that I get X percentage of? I think that might be, if you're strictly going at it not from a passion, or like, if there's people out there who just have a burning desire to help people and represent the law, and or maybe they're criminals and they want to get other criminals off, which I think that's a great idea, but I just think from a purely financial move, as I was just thinking now, because I'd never really thought about it, that might be the way that I would look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you that, when this was years ago, and Stephen and I tried a case in Bridgeport federal court, and it was a tractor trailer case, and the judge had to do a bunch of criminal arraignments on some, I don't know, bunch of big drug cases that happened down in the Bridgeport area. So, we don't move in those circles, and we hardly ever go to federal court either. So, she calls a recess in our case. We were on trial, and the courtroom fills with all these hotshot criminal lawyers. The fanciest suits, jewelry hanging off them. I mean, it was like a totally different. These were the lawyers, right? Never mind, the defendants. It was crazy. I'm like, well, who are these guys? So there was some big drug bust down there, I guess.
Gotcha. It's kind of funny that you say that. In my late teens and early 20s, I found myself in occasion in the New London or Norwich courtroom. But I always thought to myself that the lawyers are also poorly dressed, and it blew my mind because it was at that time where I was going to Three River and I was thinking like, man, I want to be a lawyer just dressed in all these suits, and it was like so often everyone looked miserable, and it didn't look like it factored into what they were doing for the day. No
Yeah,
offense, and I'm obviously not talking about you. It was something that I noticed. So when you said that about the criminal attorneys in Bridgeport, I said maybe I was just in the wrong court.
yeah, probably.
Man, go into court as a defendant is like the worst. I used to always like think every time I got in trouble, like I'd rather just go to jail, which I've never been to jail, but I was like, I'd rather go to jail than to go to court again, because it's always like the worst people, even if you're there for like a motor vehicle thing, and it's like every guy that you've ever seen from high school who's like now, smoking meth on the street is like, Sean, what are you doing, man? I'm like, oh my God, just get me. And you got to sit there for so long. Going to court is the worst experience ever, man. That should be enough to get people out of doing crime.
Yeah, right. Especially Norwich Court. My
Oh,
God,
dude,
like the humanity.
it's a grind for sure, man. My poor parents. Oh, bro. So I find you, right, to be really an interesting guy, which is why I want you to come on here, not just because, I wanted to have an attorney on, but because, I follow you on social media, and you do a lot of really cool stuff. And I think that, you're a really smart guy. How do you keep ending up in Facebook jail? How are you like, because I have friends who are on all sides of the spectrum who say wild stuff, and they're still there like every day with their like Pizzagate and their QAnon, and Like I never see you say anything that's like really out there. You're constantly like in Facebook jail.
I know, I know. Well, first of all, that's the beauty of social media, right? Because you look at it and you're like, oh, this seems like an interesting, smart guy, but I only post the interesting, smart stuff, right? I don't post my daily miseries and humiliations.
Yeah.
So, it's but no, I mean, I try to keep it, try to be authentic and keep it real. But I don't even remember the first one, but it was I got my account got restricted for sharing some meme. I don't even remember what it was, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But the fact that I shared it means someone else already posted it, right? And
Right.
so I got restricted for that. And then I got the most recent one was like a meme that I shared like 5 years ago, and it was a bunch of World War II soldiers holding a captured Nazi flag, and the
Yeah.
caption was something like, "Remember when we used to, destroy evil instead of tolerating it," or something. And I posted that like years ago,
Yeah.
and I wind in 2021, I like wind up in Facebook jail about it because the computer decided it was against community standards, whatever those are. So I'm like, you know what? Fine, put me in Facebook jail. Like, stop giving me reasons to get off Facebook.
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
They're probably doing you a favor, right?
yeah, seriously. I mean, I've got like this love-hate relationship with Facebook because it's great to keep in touch with people and to follow like family and friends that you never really see, in person, and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's like it's just particularly if you like have news sites in your feed, you just get like bombarded with crap, and like all this negative stuff, and it could cause you to spiral. And that, and like the next thing you know, you're arguing with someone who you've known your whole life because you said something that they took out of context and they got offended or something. It's like, come on,
I couldn't agree more. I deleted Facebook for a while, but then I've kind of found that I needed it to put my podcast out. Really, it's like really the most important thing to me with it. I've been off Instagram for about a year, and I really liked Instagram, but I just found myself on it so much. And then like and this sounds silly to say out loud, but I know I'm not alone in it. But I find yourself like, would I normally go to this place or do this thing, or am I doing it to take a picture to put on my Instagram? You know what I mean? And it's kind of like like a ego trip, and to get the like, oh, did this person like it, or it became like a thing for me where I didn't want to get into. But even with the Facebook, you find yourself like being angry with someone who you really like you would a conversation you would never have with a guy who like you said him your whole life. Like, man, I like this guy in person, but I don't like who he is on the internet. And I remember when Facebook was just kind of fun, and now it's just people come on like just to get mad or just to get other people mad.
Yeah, no, I know it's a problem. I mean, my wife's been off Facebook since like last almost a year now.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, she still has her account there, but she almost never goes on it, never posts anything. And she's like, you should do that. Just get off Facebook. Just stop. I'm like, well, but then I don't have a way to keep in touch with people, or I don't get because I don't watch the news anymore. I don't watch TV news. I mostly get my news online.
Yeah,
And
same.
so so I feel like you got to have some connection to it, but I'll go like I'll try to go like days or weeks without trying to post something, but then it's hard sometimes. You see something like either so outrageous or so funny or so whatever that you feel like you want to share it with people. So I don't know. I definitely try to spend less time on it now than before. I actually like Instagram better than Facebook just because like it's pretty pictures all the time.
Right.
you know. But yeah, Facebook can get you spun up really quick.
Yeah, like so with Instagram, I always liked it better too because I didn't feel obligated to follow people. Like on Facebook, I've got anybody who like I went to high school with, friend request. Okay, you know what I mean. We were never friends in high school, but sure, this is kind of what we're doing, right? Like, but Instagram, like I didn't feel obligated to follow someone just because they followed me or because I knew them, right? And it's like I don't care about what you're posting, and on Facebook, and then you unfriend them on Facebook. Luckily, they came up with that unfollow button, which is nice. But like if you unfriend them on Facebook, then you run into them, and it's kind of a weird thing. Now with Instagram, at least, like I never felt that social contract, right? That's kind of what you have in these things. It's like a a social contract, things that we just kind of do, like tipping in a restaurant. It's not a law. It's kind of a social. It's just what we do, you know. And I feel like social media has its own social contracts.
Yeah, right. I mean, you know, what do I post stuff about my travels back when we used to be able to travel. I post, you know, beer or whiskey and my dogs. It's like, you
Right.
know, basically my life, you know?
Well, that's actually how we met, right? As I came across, you were posting for a while. You were doing a lot of cool shots of like abandoned buildings, like urban decay and stuff like that. And I think that, like, and me and my girlfriend, whenever we go on vacation anywhere, we always should check out like abandoned places and stuff like that. And then, you know, I think that's how I came across you. And it's like, you know, you and Will, your son, like touring all these ballparks all over. I mean, and then all the different craft beers and whiskeys that you do. It's a fun follow, man. It's really it's good content.
Oh, thanks.
No, for sure. Like I said, it really kind of spawned a friendship from just that, you know. So that's the good side of it, right?
Right, yeah, I forgot. I mean, it was either you know pictures of a building or pictures of beer. It was one or the other. I forgot exactly.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's right. We sort of met on Instagram. Exactly.
right. Yeah, the classic American love story. um, I kind of imagine on Facebook too, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's got to be a business generator for you too, right? Like somebody's like, "Hey, this happened to me. I need an attorney." Like, and there's got people like, "Oh, let me tag Scott." Like, this, do you the same way that I would in a bar? Do you get business that way?
Um, Potentially. I mean, I've had people contact me through Facebook. Um, I'm not sure that I've necessarily like that someone's
Panned
retained
out.
me as a result of contact, but I do get contacts through it. Yeah. So, and of course, you know, our law firm has a page, and
Yeah, yeah.
you know, it's advertising, basically free advertising and exposure. So, you know, we're supposed to have a presence on social media these days, so we do. But I don't know that it's necessarily translated into a lot of business, but we do it.
Yeah, I would say, you know, just because like I like to pay attention to marketing, and I think it's kind of like, you know, everyone knows McDonald's, but they still advertise. I think just having your name just constantly people because I know like I'll see ad even though I follow your business page, you guys do ads and I see them come up, and I think it's good just to have your name in the back of people's heads, like you know, for when they do come into a situation where they would need an attorney, right?
Yeah, because I mean, you know, a lot of people, you know, they might have a legal issue, and you know, they don't necessarily want to call a lawyer like right now, but they get to see who's out there, who's doing what. So yeah, it's you know, I try to post interesting articles on things that are related to our practice areas. You know, like something on medical malpractice. I mean, most people don't know medical malpractice is like the third leading cause of death in the United States. I mean, it's crazy, but
It
yeah,
is.
yes, it
That,
is.
that's that's a fact. That's a real thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, it's really amazing. I mean, we're like a three-person outfit in North Stonington, USA, and
Yeah.
we get calls almost every single day about a potential malpractice case. And a lot of them aren't cases. A lot of them are just, you know, the doctor called me fat or
Right. Right.
you
Right.
know, something stupid. But I mean, a lot of them are potentially a case, and it's like almost every day, sometimes more than once a day. It's like
Really.
incredible
And
how much is going on.
you said a third of deaths or a third of medical. What was
Third,
that stat?
third, third leading cause of death in the United States.
Is medical malpractice.
Medical preventable medical errors, which is unreal, especially when you consider that for the last 10, 20 years maybe there's been in the medical field there's been a real effort to try to like understand it, study it, prevent it, implement
Yeah.
best practices to try to avoid it, and it still happens.
Well, like
It's
my girlfriend's in school right now. She's going to be a nuclear medicine tech, and I know she has to go over a lot of stuff like that. But nuclear medicine is actually the only medical malpractice case I personally know. And I have a friend whose grandfather at a local hospital, they like messed up a decimal point and with the radiation, and that's a big deal in the dose. But I didn't realize it was that common. And these are just what like mistakes by medical people. They forget to do something, they overdo something, or whatever. That's
there's any number of ways it can happen. I mean, failure to diagnose what's going on, right? Or failure to communicate. Like, you go in for an X-ray and it shows a cancerous, growth, but the X-ray, it doesn't get communicated to the doctor and it doesn't get communicated to the patient. These kinds of things happen all the time. Medication errors. I mean, there's any number of ways, mistakes happen, right? I mean, the order could be wrong. The prescription, the medication itself could be wrong. You could screw it up administering the medication. I mean, there's any number of ways stuff can go wrong with medications. There's just it's unbelievable the stuff that happens.
Without obviously without naming any kind of names or anything, what's like the most like egregious medical death you've seen, or even not necessarily a death or just a case? Like, is there anything that you just still to this day that you can't get your mind around, that like a doctor who's supposed to be some of our smartest people out there did?
I mean, they're all egregious. I mean, really. I mean, if you think, I mean, there's just so many examples over the years of stuff we've done. I mean, you know, nursing home death cases, for example. I mean, I've handled a number of those over the years, and I mean, not to, kind of crap on the industry, but I mean, nursing homes aren't known to be great places, right?
Right. No, for sure.
You don't want to end up there if you don't have to, right?
Yeah.
So, but I've had so many cases where bad things have happened in nursing homes and people have died, and in every single one of those cases, they were people whose family members, their spouse, their child, whoever, would visit every single day, and yet their loved ones still wound up dead because of some neglect or some kind of issue. And
Right.
that's just mind blowing to me. I mean,
Yeah.
I just settled a case. I mean, this isn't necessarily the most egregious one, but I mean, it's pretty bad. I just recently settled a case involving a fall down. The woman was, I forget how old she was. I want to say she was in her late 60s. She wasn't terribly old, but she had dementia, and
Yeah.
she was a fall risk. And she was in this nursing home for about a year, and the medical records indicated that she had at least 10 falls in that 1 year time. At least three of those falls, she had some kind of a head injury, and the last one that she experienced, she she fell. It was unwitnessed because they found her on the floor, all bruised up, but she fell, hit her head, and had multiple like brain bleeds, multiple brain hemorrhages. So they rushed her to Backus Hospital, um, and then they end up transferring her to the hospital in New Britain, and where she wound up dying from the brain bleeds like 5 days later. And it's like, this woman, you knew she was a fall risk. Every time you assessed her every 3 months, and her fall risk was increasing. Her condition was getting worse, but yet you know, they did nothing to prevent her from falling. And it's a staffing issue, right? I mean, it's a staffing issue. I mean, among other things, but the nursing homes, they're all for profit.
Yeah.
And I have nothing against people making a profit, but you got to hire the right number of staff to care for the people that you've got there.
Right. That's what I was gonna say. So, my mother's a nurse actually, and she works in a nursing home. She's like in an office now, but she did, many years in different nursing homes, and she would tell me they're criminally understaffed, and just budget, cut include the powers that be just cutting corners at every possible, location. They can't possibly take, she should be attacked by people with dementia all the time. That was part of working in that stuff, but they just don't have enough people. And that's got to be kind of what you see a lot in all of your malpractice cases, right? I mean, you got to have doctors who are overworked and understaffed. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to someone just the other day. She called about a potential case, and I don't know if it's a case, but she had an emergency C-section, and the doctor, according to her, never removed the placenta. And that's like that could be a deadly complication if the placenta doesn't come out or doesn't come out complete. Like
Yeah.
if part of it gets left behind, you can have a terrible infection and can wind up dead. So this girl got pretty sick basically, and she's describing the situation to me, and she says, well, you know um, I don't know if he got distracted because he was delivering 5 different babies at the same time. I'm like, wait a minute, what? And and so I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that's exactly what happened. But on the other hand, there's nurses in there. How did they not know? I don't know. The thing, it sounded a little bit weird to me because like, how does all those people involved like forget that the placenta has to come out? Like
Right.
so I don't know. She sounded a little bit confused, and so I kind of took it with a grain of salt. But I said, look, we'd have to look at the records and see what they show. I mean, maybe there's something there, maybe there's not. But that just it's definitely a problem if you've got the same doctor running between 5 different
Five.
rooms and trying
Right.
to
Right.
manage 5 different deliveries. And why is that? I mean, there's no shortage of OBGYNs around here, right? I mean, I don't understand that.
So that would probably just come to a hospital not wanting to pay multiple doctors, or what,
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I've come to learn that, when it comes to, these medical errors, it's not always so much that, the doctor or the nurse or whoever, was incompetent. I mean, they're all smart people. I mean, they made it through medical school, or they made it through physician assistant school, or what nursing school. I mean, they're smart people, and most of them are doing the best they can. But it's the systems, right? When bad things happen, it's because there was some kind of a system failure. And so I try to find that in the cases that I'm working on is, how did this happen, and how can it be prevented? And the hospitals are supposed to figure that out too. I mean, there's federal laws that basically say that when after something, a serious injury or a death, they're supposed to do a root cause analysis and figure out what exactly happened. What went wrong in the system. Of course, it's privileged, and they don't want to give you that report.
Right. Right.
But that's what we try to do is just kind of figure out what exactly happened here, and how can we make sure it doesn't happen again.
That's got to be scary dealing with that, and then having to go to the hospital for anything, right? Like you see all the worst case scenarios that play out in these things, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's to the point where I don't even want to go to the doctor anymore. I mean, I
Right.
go to my doctor,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I love my doctor, but yeah, no, I know. It's like there's any number of things that could go wrong, and even when our son was born, and this was 22 years ago, like I was petrified, man. It was the most terrifying experience of my life.
How is Will, man? He's such a great kid, man.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, he's great. He's actually I don't know if you saw, but he's in the State Police Academy right now.
I did not see. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So of course they started on Zoom. He's not actually in the academy. I mean, he's in the academy, but they're not living there. They started on Zoom, and this week they actually started going up there, but it's like on a commuter basis. The class is so big that they don't have enough room, I guess, to house everybody with social distancing and so forth.
Right.
So, but he's doing great. I mean, he's just the academic stuff. He's doing really well, and it's really hard. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
recruits have quit, but he's hanging in. He's doing well.
That's cool, man. Yeah, I enjoyed having him, working with me, but over the summer, he was a fun guy to be around, man. Hard worker. Yeah, I knew that he would do well in whatever he found himself
Yeah,
doing for sure.
he's such a good kid, and I think he's going to make a great police officer. I mean, he's so good with people. I mean, I could totally see him, de-escalating a bad situation because he's easy to talk to. He knows how to deal with people, and
Uh, Well, I mean, I got to tell you, that's a thankless job, right? That's not a job that I would imagine anyone wanting to get into in this current climate, right? Like,
Yeah, well, I know, and of course, he graduated last spring, right, when from college, when all of the
right,
we'll call it social justice protests were going on.
right, yeah,
But he was undeterred. I mean, he's been wanting to get into law enforcement. Not necessarily. He doesn't necessarily want to be, like a police officer for life. I mean, he
yeah.
was interested in like federal level law enforcement, but um, he did an internship in college at New Haven Police Department, and he did a summer internship here in Norwich, and they basically said, if you want to go federal, it's good to have like local police experience
Background,
first.
yeah.
So he applied to a couple of departments, but and the state police, and they need a ton of people over the next couple of years. We're going to have so many retirements. They're going to have like hundreds of openings. So they're really scrambling to try to get people, and they hired him. So he started in January.
That's cool, man. Yeah, and I'm sure he'll do great at the job. It's just, I look at the climate and the scrutiny of what goes into being a police officer. Like I said, I spent a good portion of my misspent youth, right? And I say youth, I was into my early 20s. I was immature. I was getting in trouble, but like I never blamed the cops, right? Like it was kind of like a whatever I was into, whatever I got in a fight, whatever I was doing, like I was like, all right, you got me. You know what I mean? And I always found myself to have a better experience with it. Um, but I see, like, I have friends that are police, and I see what they have to deal with, and to do that job, which is just so stressful to begin with at times, with cameras in your face, and now every move you make is going to be like micro examined. I think it's hard for people to relate, right? Like if you've never being running bars for a long time, if you've never had to physically remove another grown man from a situation, you can't really relate to what police have to go to, right? And I'm not to compare being someone who runs bars and nightclubs to being a police. But I'm just saying that I've had to do some of those things, like where you have two guys who are fighting or someone who's causing a problem, and you have to wait for the police to get there. And in the meantime, you have to de-escalate that situation. And sometimes you can't, or sometimes you're dealing with a guy and he's got a circle of his friends around you, and the pressure's through the roof, and you physically have to restrain another grown adult. There's a lot that goes into that, and I think that if you've never had to do anything like that, that it's hard to relate to, right? Like, so that's what
Yeah.
when I see things, and I'm not like a police apologist, and I know that there's people out there that just shouldn't be police that are police. I have friends that are police that shouldn't be fucking police. I mean, I would be being straight up, right? Um, but I also just know, like, having to make those decisions in that time, it's hard, and especially when you're in a crowd, and you're people watching you, and it's not anything, man. So much respect to Will is really the point of my ramble here. Is that I just to get into that right now is it's tough.
Yeah, no, there's no question. I mean, and everyone's an expert, right? When something goes wrong,
Right.
So, like for example, the George Floyd trial that's happening right now. I mean, I can't tell you I've been following it in any great detail, but I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and and he was Ben Shapiro. He was talking
Yeah.
about the day before, and it sounds like the prosecutor day before yesterday, the prosecution had a terrible day. I mean,
Yeah, I didn't. I just saw a headline that said that. I don't know anything about what happened other than.
I mean,
Uh,
they're calling their own witnesses, like they call a toxicologist or whatever, and the guy or a doctor, and he concedes that, you know, that Floyd had enough drugs in him to kill himself, like without any other intervention, right? Like if they had found him in that condition in his house, they would have just simply rolled it a drug overdose and called it a day, right? And then they showed video footage, different footage than apparently what made the news a year ago, that clearly showed the officer's knee on his back and his shoulder blades and not his neck. So it's like, well, wait a minute, like you got to be able to prove that that whatever the officer did, assuming he did anything wrong,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm not, you know, necessarily defending the officer. I mean, you know, once he's handcuffed, I was, you know, I really didn't like the fact that he was still kneeling on him.
Right.
But, you know, he didn't break the guy's neck. The guy's, you know, windpipe is undamaged. And, you know, now there's a different angle footage that shows his knee is not on his neck. So, you know, the guy has a heart condition and he's got enough drugs in his body to kill a horse. Like, you got to prove causation. I mean, you know, this is what we do in our malpractice cases, right? It's not enough to show medical negligence, and it's not enough to show that you got injured. You got to show that there was medical negligence and that the negligence actually caused the injury, right? So in other words, if you know, you're injured, all right, okay, there's negligence, but if you can't show that negligence caused the injury, in other words, if your injury might have been caused by something else, you're not going to win that case. And I've had that happen, actually, where
Yeah.
I actually had that happen years ago in a ER malpractice case. It was an infection case. Like the guy injured his finger like on a lawnmower or something, and you know, he went to Hartford Hospital, and he was basically left sitting in the hall for hours with this untreated wound, and the claim was basically that because of the poor care in the ER, his wound got infected and it turned into like osteomyelitis, which is like a bone infection, and then ended up having like part of his finger amputated because the bone infection was so bad. So, you know, a friend of mine refers this case to me, so I take it, and you know, we end up going to trial, and so, you know, we put the case on. We've got like a couple of different experts, and you know, the jury renders a verdict, and we had what are called jury interrogatories. So the jury has to answer some questions as part of their verdict form, right? So, you know, first question: do you find negligence? Do you find that the plaintiff proved medical negligence on the part of the hospital? Yes. They said the ER treatment was below the standard of care. The treatment was negligent. Do you find that the negligence caused the injury, meaning the infection and the loss of the finger? No. Because they basically bought the defense argument that the infection just happened. Infections can happen even when everything goes right.
Right. Yeah.
Just because you got an infection doesn't mean that they did something wrong. Yeah. So they had an infectious disease expert that basically said, you know, this bacteria that was the root of the infection comes from grass, and it's not necessarily because of anything that the doctor did in the ER. So how do you think the client feels when, you know, you go through a 2-3 week trial and you prove negligence, but the jury
still lose,
and you still lose? It's like, that's hard to swallow, right? But that's the thing. You got to prove the causation part. And in a criminal case, you know, if they can't prove that, you know, number one, that the cop did something wrong, and number two, that that's what caused the death, you know, if you can't prove that beyond a reasonable doubt, cop gets off. And I think that could definitely happen based on what happened the other day. I mean, this is not a slam dunk case, even though the media keeps telling us it is.
Yeah. So since the case first happened, you know, I don't want to say I've been paying attention like I'm any kind of expert on it. And I certainly haven't been like, I know they've been live streaming the trial and I haven't watched it, but I kind of see the headlines and I see what's going on because I have thought it's really interesting, right? Like, you know, to watch the video, which I have watched, it's tough to watch, right? It's tough to watch knowing that somebody died. But if you watch that same video and he didn't die, would that have been tough to watch? Like, my personal view on that was like, man, I wouldn't think that would be enough to kill a person. So then when I look at, you know, as my barroom lawyer technique, I look at it and say, was this guy guilty of murder? I don't know, because there has to be some kind of intention with I think intention matters, right? I think
absolutely.
Intent.
Absolutely. In a murder charge, you got to intend to kill this guy.
Right.
I mean,
Like,
what's the evidence that he intended to kill this guy? I mean,
right.
yeah, you know,
was he being an asshole? Yeah, man. You know, and is there different manslaughter? Are there charges where this guy is possibly negligent and in this guy's death. Man, maybe but for me, when I hear murder, I believe that police do that to people all the time and people don't die, right? They put them in that same exact position. Now, I don't know why he would keep him pinned down like that for that period of time once they had him cuffed and he'd clearly, I think that this guy is definitely guilty of something. I'm not here to defend, and that's the thing, like with social media, which I would never get into this on social media, because if you try to, I think the facts matter, whatever the facts may be. It's more important than what you feel, right? And when I look at a case like that, I'm interested to see how it play out, and I'm curious if they can get an impartial jury in either direction, right? You could get a jury that's like completely pro police. I mean, I just don't know in this climate that we're living in. Can even get an impartial jury for this?
Well, I would think that was a huge problem, right? I mean, who hasn't heard of the case, right?
Anyone, right?
And all you get is the media narrative. I mean, the narrative is that this is a slam dunk case. He was kneeling on his neck for 8 minutes and sucked the life out of this guy. Well, maybe not. The guy was already like screaming, I can't breathe," before he was ever on the ground.
And that's something I can relate to in the bar. I've grabbed people, and I've got training. I know when I'm choking someone or I'm not. I've just grabbed people to restrain them, and they'll start screaming. They can't. It's something that people do. And again, if you've never been in that kind of atmosphere, you have to do that thing. You might not know that, but that's something people will do to get you to let them go. It's like when you're a kid and they tell you, if you're being attacked, scream fire, because everyone will look. Like if someone screams, I can't breathe, I'll just be holding both their arms behind their back and trying to drag them out of the bar. I can't breathe. And everyone looks, oh, he can't breathe, let him go. And it's something that people do say when they're being whether it's true or not, when they're being restrained to try to get you to let them go.
He was screaming that while he was still sitting in the cop car. Before he was ever outside the car, he was already screaming he can't breathe. I mean, the guy, clearly was in a state of what they call excited delirium, right? He's hopped up on drugs. His blood pressure is probably going through the roof. The guy apparently had a heart condition,
Yeah.
among other things. He's got a ton of drugs in his system. And so it's a hard case, man. It's definitely not a slam dunk. And the media is like, if this cop isn't convicted, it's because of racism, right? I mean, everything's racism now, but that no, it's not because of racism. It's because of the evidence that was presented in the courtroom and what the jury decided was the facts. That's the whole point of a trial. You don't get to
Right.
try this in the newspaper.
And the irresponsibility, I think the media is really, it's tough. What I think the media kind of does for to get those clicks. I'd say to sell papers, but that's not really the goal. For those to get those clicks now, right? And I think that they're responsible if this does come out, right? If the facts are to show that this is not what killed this guy. If the medical experts do agree that this is what killed him, then that's what killed him, and that's great. But if the experts, people who actually know what they're talking about, come out and say, no, this is not what happened, and then there's violence based on that, you have accountability for that, right? Like if you're whatever newspaper or TV show, and you're telling people that, oh, hey, this is clearly a slam dunk case, and then it doesn't go that way, because you have to, you're a reporter, you should go to bed at night thinking about what you do in those situations.
There's no, look, the local media, I think, is different from the national, the big corporate
Yeah,
media.
well, that's really what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
It's
exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, they've got a narrative. It's fact free, and it doesn't matter what the facts are, and it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I mean, if and I've said this before, like if I knew, back when I was, like a college kid, high school or college kid, trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, like if I understood then how powerful the media is in terms of shaping the narrative, shaping the public discourse, shaping, the culture, I would have been a journalist. I could totally see myself being like an investigative journalist, because
Yeah.
that's kind of like what we do. Like we're plaintiffs lawyers, so we got to build a case. We got to find the evidence and prove what happened. So I could see myself doing that, but I just I never connected the dots, I guess, when I was young. But if I knew then what I know now, I definitely I would have gone into journalism, because it's amazing to me, like, what goes on. I mean, like, take any story, right? Any national story that's been in the news lately, right? Like take the Atlanta, spa massage parlor,
Yes.
right? I mean,
Right.
within minutes of hearing that, a white kid shot up an Asian massage parlor, we're told that it's white supremacy,
Yeah.
right? It's a hate crime. It, what's the evidence of that? Give
That
me.
was one that really boiled my blood because of the media turnout. You have the guy who is guilty of it telling you why he did it. He's admitted to killing 6 people and shooting 3 others. He's not going to lie about the. He's not going to be ashamed that he was racist. I wouldn't imagine at the end of that. You have the police saying, no, this is not what the kid. But everyone has decided that was a hate crime. And I know that there are hate crimes that exist, and I think that it's like crying wolf when you.
If you heard that,
Yeah,
snarf.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome.
Sorry.
I think that if you cry wolf, you know what I mean. It waters down the things that you should really pay attention to, because now, after seeing something like that, maybe I don't pay so much attention to the next case when it was really something that mattered. Those were. I'm not trying to speak badly of them. They were sex workers. This was a guy who was clearly had mental problems. I'm not making any excuses for him. He's just someone who he was a crazy person who had sexual issues and he had patronized some of these places. This is a fact, and something I don't like to really get into a lot because it pisses people off. But I think that when you come from these southern, like, super religious places, and they make you feel so bad for feeling certain things, that if you have someone that's already crazy, these inner feelings of hatred, they go and do something like that. But then, just because they so happened to be of a different race than the killer, just this past yesterday, some football player, he killed 5 people, and he happened to be black, and the people he killed happened to be white. But I didn't see anyone say that that was a hate crime. And I'm not trying to portray it. I don't think that it was, but I'm just saying, but why is the media trying to portray it a certain way? And I know that I have friends or people or Facebook friends who will say that it's a grand scheme to divide and conquer. I don't know if it's that devious, or if it's just that's what sells ad space.
I think in part it is. I mean, like what Charles Barkley said the other day. Like, the politicians or the political parties, try to gin up, class divisions, race divisions, to keep everybody fighting among each other, right? I mean, what's the point? But the double standards in this country. I mean, the double standards, like in the media, in politics, it's going to rip this country apart at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, just look at the narrative. The whites get back to the white supremacy thing. Like, that's the narrative, right? You know, because they're trying to associate the
Angry white man.
guy who's a Trump supporter, who's who has guns, who's going around shooting people, minorities that he doesn't like. That's the narrative, right? And so, okay, well, what about all these other shootings, like you said, where yesterday was a black guy, the guy who killed the Capitol police officer last week, he was a black guy. The guy who shot up the Colorado supermarket, that was a Syrian guy. Like, those aren't white people, but within minutes of those crimes happening, they're like, oh, it's probably another angry white guy. Well, no, it's not.
Right.
I mean, it's unbelievable the way that these things get treated in the media.
Yeah, and then you'll get vilified if you try to point. That's what I'm saying. Like, even about the Floyd, I think facts matter. So when I say that yesterday that it was a black guy who shot up a white 5 white people, I'm not saying that it has anything to do with him being black or anything to do with him being white. I'm not out here defending white people. I don't care about white people. I'm not out here defending. I just think that it's important to tell what is actually happening. So if someone kills someone based on race, and the race is not a factor in the crime, why is it in the headline, right? Like, if you have a hillbilly guy who drags a black guy in the South, like, hell yeah, we're talking about a racial crime. But if someone just happens to be one race and someone happens to be the other, and one of them kills the other one, causation is not correlation, and correlation is not causation, right?
Right. I mean, the only shooting, over the last year that arguably has like a racial angle to it is that one in Georgia where I forget the guy, was it the Arbery case where like the black
Yeah.
guy was like jogging through the neighborhood or something, and like two white guys in a pickup
Yeah,
truck.
yeah, and they chased him down in the truck,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So I mean that seems like there's probably a racial like angle to
Yeah,
it. But
absolutely.
just because Derek Chauvin is like kneeling on a black guy doesn't mean it's a racial killing. I
Right.
mean, what if it was the other way around? I mean, no one would be crying racism if it was a black cop kneeling on a white guy.
Yeah.
So I mean, what does that have to do with anything? Nothing. So
Um,
it's really disconcerting because it gets everybody so spun up. I mean, I've said from the beginning that this guy Chauvin may have been overcharged, right? I mean, the prosecution might not be able to prove these cases, and then if the guy actually gets off, I mean, look at all the rioting that happened last time. You think there isn't going to be rioting if he gets off after the media has been telling everybody this is a slam dunk, and if he gets off, it's racism? I mean, crazy.
so another side of racism, right? Something I wanted to ask you about, and you know, maybe I live, maybe I've been like sheltered, right, or a certain way, but I've seen things that you've posted, and it's kind of made me look into things. I didn't realize. Do you think is anti-Semitism still a big problem in this country?
It's a big problem in this country. It's a big problem around the world. I mean, it's
Yeah,
big.
and I didn't realize that, right? Like I don't have any friends who I've ever heard say anything like I didn't even realize that was a thing, but I've seen things that you've posted, so then I'll kind of check in and I'll start paying, so if I see you post something, the next time I see something in the news, I might click a little bit more and I'll pay attention to it. Obviously I saw the thing at UConn recently, but I didn't even know that like there was still such an issue that, I mean, maybe that's just totally me. But I think it's important to talk about these things, right? Because I think that when you don't talk about things at the risk of offending someone, you don't learn and you become more ignorant to things, right? And I think that it's a big problem. There was a meme, and I generally find memes to be lazy, right? I think people like, don't think for themselves and they put meme, but there was one like, they always told you don't talk about politics and religion instead of teaching you how to have conversations about difficult topics, right?
Yeah, right, right. So anti-Semitism is that's it's an ancient form of hatred, and it's interesting because it comes from the political right and it comes from the political left, right? The media only wants to talk about it when it comes from the political right. Especially over the last 4 years when they could try to blame Trump or Trump's rhetoric or whatever. Like when that guy shot up the synagogue in Pittsburgh. That guy actually did apparently have some white supremacist ideology or whatever, right? So the fact that he had used a rifle, killed a bunch of people, and maybe was associated with either neo-Nazi or white supremacist ideology, suddenly the media cares about it, right?
Yeah.
But if it's someone on the political left, like let's just say it's some radical Muslim, radical Islamic person who kills a Jewish person. Well, now it's not anti-Semitism. It's an oppressed person striking out against someone that they perceive to have more power. So the the Jewish people are the perfect victim. No matter what goes wrong, you can always blame the Jews, and it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum. You can always blame the Jews, right? I mean, Jews are being blamed for coronavirus. Pretty sure that came from China, right?
Yeah.
And there probably are Jews in China, but I don't think there's any connection to but yeah, I mean, the economy goes bad, blame the Jews. You don't like the media, you don't like Hollywood, blame the Jews. It's always the Jews' fault, no matter no matter what. And it's awful. It's just it's crazy. But it's the concern I have, like we were saying about the media, it's like, only certain things get media attention, right? So when a white supremacist shoots up a synagogue with an assault rifle, it's going to get attention, right? When some random black kid beats up an identifiably Jewish person in Brooklyn, no one notices, no one cares, right? So
So for me, right, actually, I was gonna say to give specifics on that, something that I've noticed, two specific cases I noticed. Do you know who Nick Cannon is?
yeah, yeah,
Okay, and he was on a podcast, and he had some really radical ideas I had never even heard about the Jewish people stealing their culture from Black people, and I never even heard that. I had never even heard of such a thing. I thought it was just like really like off the wall thing. But then a lot of like Puff Daddy, like really prominent Hollywood figures or music figures or whatnot came and they didn't come right out and support him, but they were when they were asked about it, they were more kind of like, like that. So then you have Gina Carano, who I know of because she was a fighter, and now she's an actress. And please let me know if I'm wrong. But when I saw what she said, was her post was about division. She said that to paraphrase that, the Nazis were able to take over because they first split up their city. Like what I got from her post was she was saying we should probably get along better before someone
yeah,
does
right.
something to her. And I don't know, and maybe it landed differently for somebody who was Jewish, but I didn't see the hate in what she said. She didn't. I didn't think she directly compared anyone to being a Nazi or I think she said if the Nazis were able to do what they do because they first divided the people they were in control of,
Neighbors,
right?
fucking neighbors or something. I forget exactly what she said, but she's
Right.
not wrong. She's not wrong.
Right.
And the problem is, well, the problem is Disney was looking for a way to get rid of her
Right.
because she's a conservative. Politically, she's conservative. And Disney had, I guess, a couple of issues with other things that she had said in the past. So she was apparently on thin ice already. And then, she posts this meme and says and they say it's demeaning to Jewish people, and it wasn't demeaning to Jewish people in any way.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem with Holocaust references is that they're always like so like overwrought. Like the Holocaust was like a unique, you know, incident in world history of like incredible evil. Millions of people slaughtered. Including 6 million people. Killed just for the crime of being Jewish, right? So it was, like on an industrial scale. So it's so when people compare Trump to Hitler, for example. I mean, that's like an inane comparison. Like Trump is not, no matter how obnoxious you think he is, Trump is not Hitler, right?
Right.
He's not rounding up citizens and sending them to death camps for slave labor, torture, and death. Like he's not doing that, right? So that's the problem with like these Holocaust references. But to get back to Gina Carano, like you know they they take the plain language, they take it out of context, they twist it, they say it's offensive to Jewish people, or it's offensive to anybody, and we've got to fire her for it. Meanwhile, the other guy on the Mandalorian, Pedro, what's his name, he posts his own Holocaust meme reference where he posted a picture of and I think it had to do with either with immigration. I think it was back, I think it was like something about Trump, keeping kids in cages, and he, analogized it to, concentration camps during the Holocaust or something, and they were perfectly fine with that. And it wasn't even a picture of like kids in cages. It was like, a picture of I don't know. I think it was like Palestinians or something. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't even like it wasn't even on our border, but they were perfectly fine with that Holocaust analogy, but they have a problem with Gina Carano. So
Well,
that was crap, really. I mean, that was really unfair to her. But
Well, I
you know,
think that culture and language and lexicon it's a continually evolving thing. Like there's things that you could say before that are now not they're taboo to say or whatnot. But I know that people speak in hyperbole a lot and they use things of extremes, right? And I think that like hit like somebody, oh, he's you can't go to that bar if you're underage. The door guy, it's like a Nazi about the IDs, right? Or I think it's something that is used a lot, and I didn't realize that it would be. I read there's like is it a theory or like we should just probably scrap that as just as people. Like let's not call this guy is like the Hitler of this, And I was like, yeah, I mean that makes sense. Like growing up I would tell somebody if I didn't like something, I'd be like, "Oh, that's gay," but I never meant that it was homosexual. It was just something we said as a term, and it's now something I would never. I actually, a funny story. I don't even remember what it was, and old habits die hard. And I was in my living room with my girlfriend and my 14-year-old stepdaughter, and I said something. I was like, "Oh, that's kind of gay," and she's like, "How is it gay?" It didn't register in her brain. Like she was like, "How is he gay?" I'm like, "No, no, no, I didn't mean it." Like because it's so antiquated. Like I was such an antiquated term that I used. You know what I mean? And but I think that if anyone listening to this can get something from it, and if you agree with me that it was something that I saw, and there was like a direct name, there's something attributed to it, like that we should just let's not say that anymore. And I think that's probably good. If it's gonna hurt, if it's gonna bring up hurtful, because when you're talking about the Holocaust, you're not talking about something that was a long time ago, right? You know what I mean? It's
There's still people alive that went through that,
through it, right? So if you're not realizing what you're saying, and you're saying that this guy is the soup Nazi, obviously that's a whole different thing. But like, and there might be some little old lady right there who just instantly is having post-traumatic stress because of it. Maybe we shouldn't say stuff like that anymore, right? Like,
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we all live and learn, right? I mean, you're right. Like, there's plenty of stuff I said as a kid I would never, say today, or there's
yeah,
plenty of things that I know that I said to people that if I could go back in time and undo it, I certainly would, right? I mean, that's part of growing up and becoming an adult. But I mean, it's the it comes down to just being a decent person, right? Like you want to just like if we all could just like treat people how we want to be treated, and live and let live, like that would solve like 99% of the world's problems if we just like treated everybody with respect.
yeah,
But when people want to throw around terms like he's a Nazi, or that's racist or whatever, it's just a way of shutting down dialogue, right? I
yes,
mean,
yes,
that's all it is. It's just because you don't need any evidence of it. You just, oh well, he's racist for saying that or doing that. Well, so he's not racist, but if he says, well, wait a minute, no, I'm not racist. It's like, well, now you're denying it, and that's racist too, right? Like
yeah,
everything's racist, and
yeah.
it's just a way of one side dominating the other. It has nothing to do with whether there's actual racism involved or not. It doesn't even matter anymore. It's just
Yeah.
a way of shutting down dialogue.
Well, yeah, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because, like I said, it's something that I was so ignorant to. Like, I didn't even realize that that was something that people were still so badly affected by, or that it was like so commonplace. But then, like, since I've noticed it, right, there was a baseball player who was playing live on like a video game, and he dropped a racial, a Jewish, anti-Jewish
Oh yeah,
slur,
yeah, I saw that.
and I was like, what the fuck? Like, I've never even heard anyone say that word. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, it's an old word. I mean, you're right, and he probably didn't know what it meant, right? Like he probably had heard it from other people and just used it like I don't even know, whatever, and without meaning to insult anybody, and but it was offensive, and so
yeah,
they disciplined him for it. But I mean, look, I'm not one of these guys where it's like we all need to walk around on eggshells, and we've all we can't offend anybody. We have to be politically correct. I hate political correctness, like but there's a difference between being blunt and not politically correct versus being purposefully hurtful or purposefully obnoxious. Like there's a difference.
right.
You
And
know, I
that's
mean,
why I thought it'd be good to talk to you about this, because I know I see your viewpoints, right? And even if you say something I don't agree with, you're not like an extreme to one side or the other, and you don't crucify people who ask you, like, who disagree with you, right? Like, because that's where it ends up, is if you do say something wrong, like you are that moment forever, right? Like, and that's, you said 99% of it would be treat people like you want to be treated, and I think maybe the other 1% would be like forgiveness, right? Because like, not no one is their worst moment, but with social, like, I can't imagine if there was social media when I was growing up in high school, things I did, things I've said, like, but now you are that forever, right? Like,
right. Yeah, so that's why like take we talked about Will, for example. Like he never goes on Facebook. He hasn't posted anything on Facebook in probably 6 years, right? Like he just because he knows like no good's gonna come of it.
yeah.
So I mean, whatever they, I mean, I think they use Snapchat where, stuff disappears or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, you got to be smart about what you put out there. I mean, look, I've posted stuff that I'm sure has offended people. I've had people unfriend me. I've had people unfollow me. I don't care. Like, whatever. I mean, I'm not like saying really obnoxious stuff. People don't want to hear me, ranting about guns or, ranting about this or that, then fine. Don't listen, but change the channel if you don't like it. But,
Right, right.
I mean, I I see plenty of stuff that other people post that I disagree with. I just scroll by. I don't have to go start picking a fight with someone about it or complaining that they offended me. You know, that's
That
just
that's
being
that's
an
that's the
adult.
other side of social media too, right? Is that people feel obligated, and I was in this, and I found myself. I won't argue with anyone. Someone I could come through on my feed and be like, someone like, I hate Irish people. I'm not obligated to be respond to everything I disagree with on Facebook. Like my opinion is not that important. You might you might be fooled of me thinking that about myself as I have a podcast here, but but realistically, what I think is not important. So why do I need if I see, for example, I'm not a gun guy, right? And I'm not for taking guns from anybody or anything. I think that there's things that we could probably do better, but I don't look at someone talking about gun laws and they're like, oh well, I need to say. Why does my opinion matter? It doesn't. It's not going to change if anything that people disagree about, if you type you get into it on social media, they're not going to change their mind. They're just going to look for reasons they're more ingrain them in whatever it is they think. You know what I mean? If you post something you think is blue and I think it's red, they're like, no man, that's actually red. You're not going to reevaluate it and be like, oh, you know what, you're red. You're like, no, not only is it blue, you're an asshole for thinking it's blue, and I just googled blue. Red doesn't even exist. It's like I
I
think that just tuning out is important.
Yeah, no, I can tell you with confidence that I have never gotten into a Facebook argument with someone and changed my mind.
Right.
No,
No.
nor do I change their mind. As persuasive as I like to think I might be, but
Right.
I mean, people have their ideas, and they have their they have their opinions, and look, it's not to say that I don't learn stuff or get a different perspective. I like to think that I could be objective, but if I got an opinion about something and I decide I want to put it out there for whatever reason, and you disagree with it, fine, disagree with it. I don't care, you know.
Yeah.
But
Well, I feel the same way, and it's if I really felt some kind of way about anything, I would more be likely to challenge someone to like a debate in this format because on Facebook, I'm going to end up arguing with 17 people instead of the one person who I was trying to talk to. And no one's ever going to back down their stance in public writing. And they don't have to respond in any kind of manner. They can respond 2 days later after they've scoured the internet for some obscure fact to come back at me with. I think I would save any arguing I had for like a live person thing. If it was something that I felt that strongly about that I needed to have a debate with somebody.
well, that's because you're a reasonable person, right? Like I'm a reasonable person. I mean, we're having a conversation. Like we don't necessarily agree on everything, but you're interested in my opinion. I'm interested in your opinion. If we disagree, we disagree. If we agree, we agree, and everything's great. We're still friends, right?
Right.
But with a lot of these people, they don't want to hear your opinion. They want to hear their opinion coming out of your mouth. And if their opinion doesn't come out of your mouth, you're a bad person. Like
Yeah.
that's what it is today, and it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Um, so this is something else I wanted to ask you about. And I'm so like I don't like to talk about anything that has to do with race because you're always like going to get killed for it. But it's just something I really had a question about. It was a case I saw in the newspaper. Okay, you had a girl in a Starbucks drive-through in Norwich, right? Who was black, and there was some redneck from Plainfield behind her laying on the horn because she felt like she was taking too long to get her breakfast or whatever the fuck this idiot was mad about. But on the way out, and there was a video of it on Facebook, and they leave X different sides of this fast food. I think it was a Starbucks, different sides of this fast food place, and the white person drops the N bomb on this one as they drive away, and she was arrested for intimidate. The charge was intimidation on racial bias or something like that, right? And it blew my mind. And fuck, I'm not defending this person, but you can get arrested for words. Like if she hadn't said the N word, if she had called her a cunt or something, like would she have still been like? I don't want to see anyone in jail for words, for anything, no matter what you have to say. Everyone, you come out, everyone named Sean should be hung in public court. No problem. Like, you shouldn't go to jail for words. And that blew my mind. Did you see that by chance in the papers? Are you familiar with that?
We did, and and yeah, I've got mixed feelings about it because obviously, to say that to someone in that context, I mean, that's disgusting, right? I mean,
Right. Right.
it
I'm not like, I want to make it really clear. I'm not defending
exactly,
this.
exactly. It's because it's indefensible. But on the other hand, is it a crime? I mean, whatever statute that she was charged with, I'm not familiar with, so I can't
Yeah.
tell you that yes, it was a crime as defined in that statute, or
Yeah.
maybe it is. I don't know what the statute is. I didn't look it up, but I've got I've got concerns about arresting people for, like you said, for speech. I mean, it's bad speech, but freedom of speech means freedom to say things that other people disagree with. I mean, calling people bad names is not nice. I get it,
Right.
but is that a hate crime? I don't know. I mean, it's a hate crime if she started calling her the N-word and started beating her up.
Right. Right.
To just kind of hurl an insult at somebody.
Right.
Is that a
Especially
crime?
because they were leaving opposite ends of a parking lot, and it was screamed like through the window. It wasn't even like this other person was in like, I could see if she was like against a wall, she couldn't escape, like, where she really felt threatened. But they're in separate cars going separate ways, and just my concern about that is like, well, at what point, who's making the rules on what the words are, and then they decide, what if they decide something else, going to arrest you for what you're saying, like, where that's a very slippery
Oh, I
slope
agree.
with
I
with
agree.
with freedom of speech, right? I don't, you know and something people like to say a lot is, there's freedom of speech but not freedom of consequences, and I totally agree. Like, if that person's employer wanted her to fire her for that, absolutely, that's not a freedom of speech issue. But for you to be put in a cage because of a word you said, I don't, I can't I can't get behind it, no matter what the word was, no matter what the context was. And that was something I was dying to ask you about.
Yeah, I know the case. I mean, I remember reading about it, but
Yeah.
I didn't bother looking up whatever statute she was supposedly charged with. But I have like the same concerns. Like, just, I mean, like, we grew up in a day and age where you could hurl insults at each other, and that was just life. Like, toughen up, right?
Yeah.
Like, my grandmother would tell me, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Like, I've said bad things to people. Other people have said bad things to me, and that's life. But
Right.
you know, when it crosses the line into becoming a crime, like, that makes me
That's,
uncomfortable.
I agree. I just I don't think that. And again, man, I don't ever want this to be anyone thinking that I'm defending this other person, because I'm not, right? Like, I'm not taking that position. I'm just taking the position, again. I just said this, but like, we shouldn't put humans in cages over the words they say. If that's all there was to it, and I've seen the video, and I'm making my judgment just based on what I saw in the video, and I have no idea. I wasn't there. I wasn't in the. I just thought it was kind of scary. Like, that was like, I see people all the time who are paranoid, or I feel like they're paranoid about the government taking over or something. That was like the one thing I was like, ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah, right, right. I mean, look, it's different. If I mean, words. I mean, if words are used like to incite violence, right, and then someone goes out and commits violence,
Very different.
that's a different story, right? But just calling someone a bad name, that
Yeah.
no, that seems like a stretch to me.
Right. I agree. Like, a call to violence is something very different. But
So,
all right, man. Well, I think we're well over an hour. I don't want to keep you all night, but we hit a lot of stuff that I really wanted to ask you about. That I think is important and interesting stuff. Would you tell everyone, like, about your practice and where they can get you and what kind of stuff you handle that they should be hitting you up for?
oh, all right. So, my firm is the law firm of Stephen M. Reck and Scott D. Camassar, and we're in North Stonington on Route 2 in the Holly Green Plaza, and we do all types of personal injury cases, medical malpractice, wrongful death, car and truck crashes, pretty much anything you could think of in the personal injury realm. We handle, injured, cases for injured people, and we've got a lot of experience. I mean, I've been a lawyer 25 years. My partner Steven's been a lawyer for I think 28, 29 years. We have our associate Isabel, who's I think has been with us I think 7 years now. So it's the three of us. We've got experienced paralegals, and we do a good job. I think. Be nice if we can go back to court sometime, but courts are still closed. It's, for over a year now, and it's going to be a backlog that's going to take years to undo. But
Yeah, I have. I don't know if you've seen like on Facebook or just read about it in the paper. A very very close friend of mine was murdered back in October 2 years ago, and the person who did it is awaiting trial, and his lawyer tried to get him off, try to get the charges dismissed because of not having a speedy trial. I mean, that's kind of where we're at with this thing. COVID has kind of made everything crazy, and everyone's waiting for justice, whether it's criminal or to, civil, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's terrible. There's no indication when jury trials are going to start again. So, and when they do, they have to give priority to criminal cases, right?
Right.
Family violence, that stuff's going to be, get the priority. And, those of us doing personal, civil litigation, personal injury cases or whatever, we're going to be last on the list. So I don't know.
What's the biggest settlement you ever got? Anybody? Let's get some customers in there. Let's wet those beaks. Have you made millionaires?
A couple.
Couple of millionaires.
We had that tractor trailer case I mentioned in Bridgeport. That was, I think, 2.5 million. The last one we did 2 years ago, that was, it was 2.8 million, but the jury said our client was 50% responsible, so it got cut down to 1.4 million. But we've had a couple, we've had other, settlements of $1 million or more, but it's it all depends on the nature and extent of the damages, right? So death cases or real serious injury cases, those are the big money cases. I mean, you're run of the mill rear end, my neck hurts. I mean, that's not $1 million case, right? I mean, maybe it's a $20,000 case, but it's definitely not $1 million case. But that 2.5 million, I mean, that was a brain injury. It was a church pastor who was never able to work again. So that was a pretty significant injury, and that's where the big money comes in, because the compensation is based on the extent of the injury. So.
Right. All right, cool, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think you hit a lot of cool stuff. I think people are gonna dig this, man. Thanks, man. And check Scott out on Instagram it's SDCMSR.
SDCAMASSAR.
Check him out on Instagram. It's a good follow. It's
yeah, no, you're right. SDCAMSR is my Instagram. Right.
Yeah. I'll throw that up on the screen. But yeah, when you get back to life, people should be checking you out on your cross country tours, man. You're never at work. You're always at a baseball stadium.
Yeah, I don't know about this year, but we'll see.
Good Cheers, to see you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Take care. Thanks, Scott.
Bye.
Cool.
The Shamrock Show is brought to you by BeardOctane.com. Check them out at BeardOctane on all your social media sites. Use code Shamrock10 for 10% off your purchase. Again, BeardOctane.com, code Shamrock10 for all your beard and grooming needs. They got lots of great homemade style products. BeardOctane.com.